Good evening. It is Tuesday, August the 30th, about 7:20 p.m. This is Shay Gibson with Weather Flow and Wind Alert, bringing you a tropics update. So we're watching several active areas in the Atlantic Basin right now. The closest to mainland being Tropical Depression number 8. The winds are at 35 miles an hour, pressure at 1,011 millibars. This system has been skirting the Outer Banks of North Carolina for pretty much most of the day, and it should start to head off to the northeast here very soon. It's not expected to strengthen anytime soon for at least the next few hours. But as we get into tomorrow, it could go through a little bit of a strengthening phase to acquire tropical storm status. It hasn't reached it yet. It was expected to possibly make it there before now, but it just hasn't shown any organization. Just lack of organization and lack of strong surface circulation has kept this system weak. Plus, there's been a lot of upper shear involved with it, which has limited its growth, and it's torn away the cloud tops to limit the vertical stacking on the system. So this system will start to move off to the northeast, and in time will race off very quickly. You see the swath here between 2 p.m. Wednesday and 2 p.m. Thursday. That's a lot of ground to cover, and then even off to Friday, even more ground. So this system will be heading off into what we call the hurricane graveyard, and it will be no more. But going back to our map, we're going to come back to Tropical Depression number 9. That is a high area of interest right now because it is favored to strengthen and develop in this area and then head up to the Big Bend of Florida and have some effects possibly even through the Carolinas. So real quick first, I want to talk about Gaston. Now Gaston has been rather pleasantly surprising out there. It's not any threat to land right now, so it's really interesting. We can learn a lot of things from it being away from land and not a threat to the United States. It may have some effects as it heads off to the northeast over the Azores as a tropical storm as it weakens over time, but for right now it has really good symmetry. The winds are at 110 miles an hour, which keeps this at a Category 2 hurricane. Pressure down to 964 millibars. It weakened just a little bit in strength and somewhat in the last several hours, so this storm has been fluctuating in strength and it's been lasting quite a while. And if we look at the loop on this, you can see a very structured eye wall, very good symmetry, outflow on the storm as it continues to turn away in the Atlantic. So I mean, it's actually pretty impressive for where it is at its latitude, at about 32.5 degrees latitude, heading towards the 33-degree north latitude. Well out in the Atlantic, but very impressive storm nonetheless. So going back to our map, the other area of interest is going to be this one. This is Invest 92L. And it's going to be heading to the west. Right now it is fighting with Saharan dust off of the desert at the mid-levels. And if we look here, we can see that this system is going to be struggling with this area of dry, dusty air that has come off of the Saharan desert. These low-level jets blow this air high up into the atmosphere, up to the mid-levels, and then it scoots off the coastline, and then these tropical waves, they go counterclockwise and they sort of ingest some of this dry air into it, and it presents a real battle for these systems to be able to make it at all as a tropical system. So the models were very aggressive on this, but right now we're watching to see if it even holds together. There is a relatively healthy moisture shield that's trying to develop around it. Here's that dry air intrusion coming down in these blues, and these reds and oranges mean this is where the higher precipitable water is involved with the system. So it looks like here in the last frames we're seeing some surge of some more moderate moisture trying to get wrapped around the system. So if it does get this sort of a moisture shield wrapped around it all the way completely and still heads off to the west, it could develop in time. National Hurricane Center is not developing it until somewhere right about here. So it's basically they're taking their time with it. If we look at the 5-day outlook, you can see how far out that they go with this system where it does not develop because it's going to be fighting that Saharan dust and that dry air. Also, maybe a little bit upper shear in this environment here. But once it gets out a little bit closer towards the Leeward Islands, we're going to have to really start watching the system. Nothing's for certain yet. Some of the tracks are taking it up towards the southeast, some across the Gulf or into the Gulf. There's just no real way to tell yet until we watch what happens with the ridge that's built over the Atlantic Ocean and see if it holds together to drive this system all the way to the west. So that's usually one of the driving mechanisms when we have a large ridge out in the Atlantic that steers these systems to the west in time. So nothing for certain there yet. We're just watching that system from afar. Now we're going to go to Tropical Depression number 9, and we're going to talk about this one. I'll come right back to that one. I definitely want to hit back on Tropical Depression number 8. I didn't want to forget about that one. So if we look at the loop for Tropical Depression 8, you can sort of see there's just no real organization. There was some convection that flared up. There's a little bit of convection this evening flaring up, but there's no real center that you can see in this rainbow loop. So pretty much the gist is that the system is going to head to the north and then curve off to the northeast and have just minimal effects on the Outer Banks. In fact, if we look at Datascope, we can kind of get an idea of what the winds are. The highest winds I saw were this morning about 31 miles an hour at the Diamond Shoals buoy and just inside Pimlico Sound around 4:30 to 4:50 a.m. in the morning. So early this morning was some of the higher winds that we saw as the gradient tightened along the North Carolina coast. But there just really isn't much going on up here. I mean, we're seeing about 16 to 19 knots. The winds are sort of up and down. There isn't really any consistency as far as tropical storm force winds to be making it into the coastline. I just haven't seen that today. I think most of the activity is staying well off the coastline, and it's going to head off to the north and northeast, and probably will not see tropical storm force winds along the Outer Banks. Even though there is a warning, there is a chance that you could see some squall lines or storming activity that could bring those winds up to that exact number for tropical storm force winds. So the next one we're looking at, tropical depression number 9. I'm going to come back to this map in just a second. Let's go ahead and take a look at what the National Hurricane Center has. Winds at 35 miles an hour, pressure down to 1,004 millibars. This system is starting to show a little bit of structure, and we'll go into that in just a sec. Here's the track of this system. The GFS and the Euro models are both in agreement of building this to at least a tropical storm status. The Euro is a little bit more aggressive, and it has been for days now, as it did predict this coming into the Gulf, meandering for a little bit, and then heading up to the northeast and growing in intensity. So we can't rule that out yet, but the National Hurricane Center is remaining a little bit more on the conservative side and keep this as a tropical storm. We're not going to use the word hurricane yet because that is just, it's too early to determine if any rapid intensification will allow for it to build to hurricane status before it makes landfall sometime Thursday afternoon. Some of the higher effects are going to be here along the western Florida coast and the Gulf, and so we'll have to keep an eye on the development of the system. Let's go ahead and take a look at the rainbow loop for this one, and you can see a clear swirl starting to come together here, basically just above the Yucatan, west of Cuba, and you can definitely see that swirl right about there. That's about where we think that the center is going to be for the system, or for building, as long as it can keep wrapping convection around it now that it's out over open waters and doesn't have any limitations from this whole mountain range of Cuba. We're going to see a little bit more convergence coming up from the south over these open waters, where they're very warm waters, by the way. And if we look at the sea surface temperatures, I'll go ahead and take a peek. I may not be able to find the sea surface temperatures here. They're about 30 to 31 degrees Celsius, which is about 86 to 88 degrees. The water is very warm and very conducive at the surface to help fuel the system. So right now we're seeing the swirl here just north of the Yucatan, west of Cuba. We're going to see some more convergence occurring overnight and into tomorrow, and this system's going to start heading up to the north-northwest, to the north, and then the upper shear right now is just to the north of this, where you see a little bit of this sort of a southwest to northeast shear, and that's going to relax over time. So that's why we think that this system does have some potential to develop. We may get the name Hermine tonight from Tropical Depression number 9 if Tropical Depression number 8 does not beat it to it first. So looking over the water vapor imagery, here we see Gaston way over here exiting the map. Here's the system down here that's coming together, and we see a little bit of dry air to the north, but we also have this upper low that went into South Carolina today, just south of Charleston. And this upper low is going to dissipate as a strong jet stream develops across the country, very high up at about 300 millibars. It's about 30,000 feet. Once this low runs into this jet stream, it's going to get pulled right into it and pulled out into the ocean. So, but for right now, there is a little bit of an upper level shear going on from west to east across the north of this system. It's about 25 knots, so it's very moderate, not very strong for upper shear, but it could limit a little bit of the development along the north end of the system for now, at least for the next maybe 18 to 24 hours. But as we get into tomorrow's going to be the crucial day to watch this system, to see what develops from it, and see if it really can get some intensification going. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the models for this thing. Now here's the GFS, and we'll go back to 0 hours, and I want to take a look at what the GFS is doing with it. And what it shows is that there's a steady progression for development of the system, and as it heads into northern Florida, let me back out just a little bit so we can all see the map here. As it heads towards the Big Bend of Florida, we see the winds start to come up. So you see the wind field increasing, the gradients increasing along this side of the system, and this is where I think that the system is going to have its strongest impacts. Are going to be basically north of, I'd say, Fort Myers to Fort DeSoto. Or Sarasota, I'm sorry, not Fort DeSoto, that's in Tampa Bay, but Sarasota, Florida, and head north up through Tarpon Springs. I think this area of Florida is going to see a lot of these stronger winds as that southerly convergence really pulls up and around the system, and we get some squall lines moving through the Tampa Bay area. So the GFS is showing 50. These wind barbs right here show about 50 to 55 knots. That could be possible close to this side of the eastern side of the system. So we'll have to keep watching to see what the development of the storm does. The GFS only develops this into a tropical storm. The main wind barbs right around the core of it keep the winds right about 45 knots. I'd say 30 to 45 knots. So it keeps it as a minimal to maybe a moderate tropical storm system. If we look at the Euro develops this a little bit more as it heads to the northeast. So you can see that the pressure drops 990 millibars. That is skirting a minimal hurricane or a Category 1 hurricane. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be one, but you can also see on this model that the concentration of the most energy of the system is going to be on the eastern side. We do think that there's going to be a little bit of dry air pulling down from the west, and we'll get into that in just a little bit, but most of that energy is going to be channeled along the eastern side, much like Colin, if you remember Colin, that skirted the Florida coast and went up through the Big Bend earlier in the hurricane season. This will be kind of a similar situation with all that energy focused on the east. One thing we have to worry about is the tropical storm surge. So when we start looking at what the potential is, we saw that in Tampa Bay. We saw a lot of flooding, localized flooding from the high tide blending with the rain, blending with a little bit of a surge from that system, especially if you get winds in excess of 40 miles an hour. You're going to have water piling up in Tampa Bay. So here is the extratropical storm surge map that the National Weather Service has from NOAA, and we saw last time that these values really did ring true. They came very close to meeting these numbers. These blue lines represent the actual height of the tide. So the mean high water level here is just about 2.3 feet on Thursday and even into Friday. So Thursday is when we think the highest impacts are going to have for the Tampa Bay, the St. Petersburg area. And you can see this black line right here is the estimated forecast for the amount of water that's going to be building. So you can see it's almost double what the blue line has. So we're going to have to really watch the storm surge from the system. It may not be very much, but a couple of feet adds up in some areas, especially along northern Tampa Bay, where most of the water will pile up along those strong southerly winds. So that's one thing to keep an eye on, is the storm surge along with those high winds piling that water up. Now, if we go back to the Euro model and we watch what happens with this track, you can see that easterly energy, and it channels off as it heads across Georgia. We see a lot of that energy remain to the east of the system, and the intensification actually remains at 990 millibars. So there may be an upper trough and jet stream developing where there's a cold front coming down that will capture this system at the same time that it's coming across Georgia and into South Carolina. And we do think that the upper jet will be crossing this direction. The cold front here will create an elongated trough down into the southeast that will pick up the system and rapidly pull it away along the Atlantic seaboard and off to sea eventually. There's some models that were playing with keeping it up here, maybe running it into up around the Massachusetts area and further north, but I do think that this cold front will be able to pull this system up along with that jet stream. So if we look at the jet stream, let's take a quick look and see what the future cast is going to have for this. So we see this as we get into Wednesday, and here's Thursday morning, and then we see Thursday afternoon, we see that jet stream taking a dip. This is a little bit of a Rossby wave, what we call Rossby wave, when the jet stream dips down and we actually have a jet streak, very strong winds that come just around that southern bend of the jet stream. This is 300 millibars up, so that's about 30,000 feet. And as we get into Friday, we see that jet stream remaining in place. So this is going to be a fairly consistent jet stream to remain from Thursday to Friday, and that's why we think that we will pull the system at least up along the trough that's going to be developing as well. We can get a little bit of a better idea of that trough if we look at the GFS. Let me take a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly. This is for Thursday, and here's the system making landfall up along the Big Bend of Florida. Here's the apparent low with the cold front that's going to be dropping down. We can kind of follow the isobars all the way down to here, and we see that cold front. We have drier air coming down from this side, which is what will keep the western side of the storm drier than the eastern side, and that will continue to be the case as the storm crosses up across the Carolinas. So let's take one more jog forward, and we can see that it is following this trough, and as far as the GFS solution is concerned, is going to follow up along this trough right here. So that's kind of the general idea of what's going to happen. Looking back at the Euro, as it crosses Carolina, it takes off really fast along that jet stream. So we're basically saying Friday is going to be kind of a a washout as far as the Carolinas go for Georgia, South Carolina, and even North Carolina. These coastlines are also susceptible to some of that higher extratropical storm surge, or from that tropical storm surge forecast model that I showed. It is more susceptible to some of that as well for higher tides. If we go back and take a look at that, we'll go to the southeast, take a quick look at Charleston. And here's our forecast for the tides. Not very much. I mean, we already have a little over 6 feet on Wednesday, a little over 6 feet on Thursday, and then Friday's a little bit less, but we can see that the forecast for the tides is higher, and you can see that those values have been met for here, and for here already. So it looks like they're on track to meet these values. So we're almost about 7 feet. Some of those low-lying areas in the Charleston area or the South Carolina area, any place that has nuisance flooding from street flooding or tidal surging, be on the lookout for that. And I think that's going to do it for the Tropics Update. We continue to watch. We'll see what the National Hurricane Center does. We may get the update tonight at some point to see if we have Tropical Storm Hermine in the Gulf. I don't think that Tropical Depression number 8 is going to be able to achieve that. So until at least it turns to the north and northeast and maybe gains a little bit of momentum in that direction and gets away from some of that upper shear, we may see it become a tropical named system. But for right now, it's not looking too healthy, and this one is actually starting to look even healthier, Tropical Depression number 9 in the Gulf. So this will be the one to watch. It looks like landfall Thursday afternoon, and then heading across the Carolinas. This track has shifted just a little bit to the west now, and we'll have to continue to watch to see if it goes even further west, because it'll just mean even more rains and squalls and wind for the Carolina coast. The further west it goes, the worse it will be. So we're hoping that it'll just skirt the coastline and head on out to sea without too much damage in its wake. So until the next tropical update, take care and thanks for watching.